You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I have to start with the Patriots stunning the world. They brought Cam Newton back on a one-year deal worth about $14 million. Now, it's important to note that we don't know the specifics of this deal. We don't know how much money is guaranteed. We don't know what incentives there are. All we know is that the maximum value of this deal is $14 million. What's also important to note is that Adam Schefter of ESPN said that this move won't stop the Patriots from adding another quarterback. He didn't say whether that's a starting quarterback or a backup quarterback. So it seems like there's a real chance that Cam Newton could once again be the opening day starter for the Patriots. The reality is, it's impossible to hate this move. At this very moment, you can't properly cast judgment on it. If the plan is for Newton to be the starter next year for the whole season, like he was last year, what are the Patriots doing? Because Newton was dreadful last year. Threw for under 2,700 yards, had 8 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. I don't care what he did with his legs. Alright, that's irrelevant to me. If you're winning and you're making the playoffs like Lamar Jackson, okay. I can live with that. The Patriots went 7-9 last year. They were a bad team. They didn't even come close to making the playoffs. You had people towards the end of the season saying, hey, don't count out Belichick, it's still possible. No. That was just nonsense. I never thought they were going to make the playoffs. And you can go back to once the season started. Listen to those shows during last NFL season. I never said that the Patriots would make the playoffs. The reality is, with Cam Newton at the helm, they were shells of their former selves. It was great to see. The dynasty is dead. And it's kind of funny. Right after the Buccaneers announced that they signed Tom Brady to a 1-year extension, tying him to the Buccaneers for the next 2 seasons, that will make him 45 years old at the end of the contract. The Patriots do this. They bring back a below-average quarterback. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. And let me just say that I have no reason to doubt that in Brady's age 45 season, he'll still play great football. In fact, I'd even venture to say it's more likely than not that he'll play good football at the age of 45. This guy has shown no signs of slowing down. It's absolutely incredible. But back to the Patriots, there is a way that bringing Newton back can make sense. And it's by righting a wrong that happened last year. They need to draft a quarterback. It is just that simple. Maybe last year, Bill Belichick really believed that Jarrett Stidham could be the answer. He showed no signs of being a franchise quarterback. It's clear that Belichick never fully trusted him. He may have wanted to, but Stidham never earned it. Stidham was dreadful in relief of Newton and Brian Hoyer. Newton started 15 games last year for the Patriots. You know who started that other game? Brian Hoyer. Not even Stidham. It's really crazy. Everyone outside of the Patriots organization knew that Jarrett Stidham couldn't be a franchise quarterback. Belichick trusted him enough to not draft a quarterback last year. That turned out to be a disastrous decision. I can guarantee you that Jacob Eason, Jake Fromm, James Morgan, any of the day 3 rookies would have been better than Stidham. The Patriots need to right that wrong. They need to draft a quarterback this year. Hell, do it in the first round. You have the 15th overall pick. You're in position to take a guy like Trey Lance, Kyle Trask, or Mac Jones. If the Patriots take a quarterback in the upcoming draft, it doesn't need to be the first round. It needs to be high, but it doesn't need to be the first round. If the Patriots do that, bringing back Newton makes sense. But if they're going to go into next season with Newton as the unquestioned starter, there's no way that's going to end well. And I'll say one other thing. I don't buy the notion of the Patriots just wanted a quarterback on the roster. What does that mean? It's the off-season. You don't need to have a full roster. That's okay. The Jets don't have a quarterback on the roster right now. Yes, I know that Sam Darnold is still under contract with the Jets, so is James Morgan. I don't think either one of those guys are franchise quarterbacks. In fact, I don't think either one of those guys are even competent quarterbacks. I'm not screaming doom and gloom about that. The Jets have a month and a half before they really need to add a quarterback. It's the same thing for the Patriots. What, you think there was going to be a big run on Cam Newton if you let him hit free agency? No way. Maybe Newton would have signed before the draft, but he wouldn't have signed like the first day of free agency. Can this move make sense for the Patriots? The answer is yes. If you're going to have Newton compete with a young quarterback like Lance, Trask, or Jones, fine. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But if Newton's gonna be the starter next year, and that's basically lock, stock, and barrel, he has no real competition, that's a terrible job by the Patriots. And that makes me very happy as a Jets fan. Staying in the AFC East, the Bills signed Matt Milano to a pretty big extension. 4 years, $44 million. And this is a hard one for me to get behind. Matt Milano barely played last year. The guy only played 335 snaps. That's a career low. The 10 games played is misleading. Some of those games he was only playing like 15, 20 snaps. And in those snaps, he really wasn't that good. He had a career worst 55.8 overall grade, according to Pro Football Focus. I understand that Milano usually puts together better seasons than that, but not great seasons. Milano's not a great player. He's good. There's a role for him in the league. To give him $11 million a year, though, I can't get behind that. I understand that he's young. He's going to turn 26 on St. Patrick's Day. You drafted him in the 5th round. You developed him into a good player. But $11 million a year? That's a bad move for the Bills. Milano won't embarrass himself out there, but it'll be clear to everyone watching that he's massively overpaid. Moving on now to the Lions, cutting Justin Coleman. And I don't mind this move for the Lions. I like Coleman. I don't think he's a bad player, but the Lions were in salary cap hell. Cutting him actually gets the Lions under the cap. So it's hard for me to say, oh, what are the Lions doing? This is a terrible move. And Coleman's also coming off a bad season. Last year he had just a 47.4 overall grade. He was also on a mammoth contract, 4 years, $36 million. That was an overpay. Coleman's a good player. Had some good years with the Seahawks. I could see him going back to play for Pete Carroll on a 1-year prove-it deal. But I don't mind this move for the Lions. It makes sense. They cut someone who had a really bad year to get under the cap. He's a good player. I like him. But the move makes sense. Moving on now to the Texans signing Mark Ingram to a 1-year deal worth up to $3 million. And it's very easy to make fun of the Texans. There's no question about that. But this move actually makes a lot of sense for him. Realize, they cut Duke Johnson. Now, they brought back Dontrell Hilliard, who would have been an okay RB2. But Mark Ingram is much better than Hilliard. I mean, it's not even close. Ingram is just 1 year removed from having a 1,000-yard season where he made the Pro Bowl and had 10 touchdowns. Now, last year, the Ravens drafted J.K. Dobbins. They were going with a 3 running back committee. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and Ingram. And obviously they had some designed running plays for Lamar Jackson. Ingram was the odd man out. Even though he started 9 games more than Edwards and Dobbins, he had less carries than both those guys. He had less yards. He had less touchdowns. He was the third wheel. But he was still putting up 4 yards a carry. That's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. I mean, the Texans now have some pretty talented running backs. David Johnson, once upon a time, was one of the best running backs in the NFL. Yes, those days are long gone, and Johnson's now a laughingstock because he was traded for DeAndre Hopkins. But he is a solid player. He's a good player in this league. Same thing with Ingram. And Dontrell Hilliard's no slouch. The Texans next year, I think, are going to have a ground and pound style offense. Because Deshaun Watson isn't going to be there. I don't care what anyone says. Watson's gone. I don't care who they get to replace him. Sam Darnold, Tua, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson. You don't want to put a lot on that guy's plate. It would benefit the Texans to go with a more run-heavy offense. And you know what? They have the backs to do it. This move makes a ton of sense for the Texans. In fact, 2 months from now, it could go down as one of the best signings of the offseason. That may sound crazy, but Ingram fits the Texans perfectly. Moving on now to a report from Ian Rappaport of NFL.com that says that Damontae Kazee probably isn't gonna re-sign with the Falcons. Now this is kind of interesting, because the Falcons have their 2 starting safeties from last year, Ricardo Allen and Keanu Neal, as pending free agents. And they're probably gonna want a pretty big contract. Kazee is coming off a year where he only played in 4 games. He had an ACL tear. Now he should be back at 100% for next year, which is why I thought he could go back to the Falcons on a cheaper deal. I understand that the Falcons are in cap hell right now. They're $14 million over the cap. But Kazee is going to want less than Allen and Neal. And Kazee's a solid player. Last year, he had a 65.1 overall grade. The year before, 60.8. He's a solid player. I mean, I'll tell you, it wouldn't surprise me if Kazee signed with a team that gave him a real opportunity to start. Bad job by the Falcons. I really thought he could have helped them next year. Thought he made a ton of sense as a cheaper option at safety for a team that's facing a big cap crunch. I'll be very interested to see what the Falcons end up doing at safety. Granted, you can get by without a good, strong safety, but you can't get by without a good free safety. It'll be interesting to see how the Falcons attack that. Moving on now to the Lions, cutting Jesse James. And I like this move for the Lions. I'm not a big James fan. I don't think he's awful, but I don't think he's great. And the Falcons have a young stud tight end in TJ Hawkinson. And if the Lions designate James as a post-June 1st cut, they'll save $5 million. Like I said, the Lions aren't in a great cap position. They could use that $5 million. I like the Lions cutting James. It makes a ton of sense. They can replace him with a blocking tight end, and they'll be fine because they have Hawkinson as their receiving tight end. Moving on now to the Texans, signing Christian Kirksey to a one-year deal worth a maximum $4.5 million. And I don't hate this move for the Texans. I don't love it because Kirksey's best days are behind him. He got a big contract from the Browns a few years ago, and right after that he fell off a cliff. Last year he was a Packer and had just a 43.9 overall grade for him. But I will say this. The Texans are going to need veteran leadership. They're going to have a lot of new faces. Everyone's going to enter that season with a woe-is-me mentality. Most likely a new quarterback. We're not going to win anything. And even if Watson's still there, he's going to be miserable. That's going to infect the locker room. The Texans need veterans. While Kirksey doesn't offer much in terms of on-the-field play anymore, his veteran presence will be invaluable to the Texans. This will be his 8th year in the league. This move makes sense for the Texans. I'm not as crazy about this move as I am the Ingram move because Kirksey isn't a great player anymore, but the move makes sense. It seems like they're gearing up to move on from Watson. Actions speak louder than words. They're making the moves that they would need to do to fill out a Watson-less team. The last part of that, though, is actually trading him. Hopefully to the Jets. Moving on now to the Patriots, re-signing Justin Bethel to a really big deal. 3 years, $6 million. That may not seem like a big deal, but you gotta realize, Bethel is just used on special teams. Now, he's a great special teamer. There's no question. And yes, the Patriots appreciate special teams more than probably any team in the league. Maybe the Saints are ahead of them. Maybe. I mean, people forget this. Bill Belichick, at one point in time, was a special teams coach. He has that background. When Joe Judge left for the Giants, no one thought that the Patriots special teams was going to suffer. They had Belichick. To give a special teamer who's not even the main special teamer. He's not a kicker. He's not a punter. He's a gunner. I can't endorse giving that guy $2 million a year. I understand that the Patriots have gobs and gobs of cap space. They have the third most cap space in the league, $68 million. They're behind the Jaguars and Jets. So it's not like this will set him back a lot, but you can't throw that money around willy-nilly. I'm not in love with this move. I get why the Patriots did it. The logic makes sense. But it's tough for me to fully endorse this move. Moving on now to the Bills, re-signing Daryl Williams to a 3-year deal worth $28.2 million. This is a great move for the Bills. A lot better than the Milano move. I thought Daryl Williams could actually go to the Jets. I thought there was a possibility that they were going to cut George Fant and bring in a better right tackle in Williams. Now, forget about it. Last year, Williams was an integral part of Josh Allen's success. I spoke about how the Bills provided the blueprint to how you should build around a young quarterback. It starts with a wide receiver, that's still true, but a big part of it is the offensive line. Williams was a major reason why Allen was so successful. He had a 79.4 overall grade last year. He is a perfect example of why prove-it deals work. After a bad year with the Panthers in 2019, where he had a 56.1 overall grade, the Bills signed him to a 1-year prove-it deal. You're going to be our right tackle. We believe that you can stay healthy and return to your 2017 form, where you were a really good right tackle. And if you succeed, we'll pay you. It worked. Williams was great last year. And now there are like no good right tackles in free agency. Williams is off the board. Taylor Moton got franchise tagged by the Panthers. The Jets are stuck with George Fant, which I don't hate. I don't think Fant is awful. I don't think he's great. But there are worse players in the league than him. It just would have been nice to have an upgrade. That's all it is. Moving on now to the 49ers, re-signing Emmanuel Mosley to a 2-year deal worth up to $10.1 million. And I don't hate this move for the Niners, but I don't love it. Mosley's first year actually playing was 2019. 2018 was technically his rookie year, but he got hurt. 2019, Mosley had a really good year. He had a 70 overall grade, and it looked like he was going to be a really big secondary piece for the Niners going forward. Last year, he took a step back. He had a 58.3 overall grade. He wasn't awful last year. He just wasn't the player that you thought he'd be. You thought he was going to take a big step up. To give a guy like that $5 million a year potentially, that's tough for me to get behind. I don't mind the Niners bringing Mosley back. He has potential. This is just too rich for my blood. 2 years for $5 million total would have made more sense. Alright, now I'll give you some baseball Valk talk. And Major League Baseball has put some interesting experimental rules into the minors. I'll attack them all one by one. In AAA, their adding larger bases. Major League bases are 15 inches in a square. In AAA, it'll be 18 inches. So that could result in more infield hits. Fielders need to be on the lookout. I don't hate the idea. I'd want to see it in practice before I endorse it for the majors. But the idea does make sense. It will reduce the runner accidentally spiking the first baseman. One thing that I will give Rob Manfred credit for before we get into this is instituting these rule changes in the minors first. I understand last year, 60 games, joke of a season anyway, throw everything at the wall for that season. I get that. This coming season, no asterisk, no nothing. Try it in the minors. See if it works. I'm okay with that. And yes, space it out to different leagues. One league has one rule change, another league has another rule change, so that way you're gradually introducing the changes to the players. That's the right way to do it. Good job by Manfred. In AA, they're putting in an illegal shift rule. The defensive team must have a minimum of 4 players on the infield, each of whom must have both feet completely on the dirt. So it's not the illegal shift rule that you think of. You can still have more than 2 infielders on either side of second base. But it's a start. I don't mind it. I see it both ways. I understand the argument of you want more offense. And you really put the true pull hitters at a big disadvantage when you do the Williams type shifts. But I understand the other argument, hey, just learn to hit the other way or just bunt it down the third base line. The thing is, though, that's not taught anymore. It should be taught. There's no question. There is no question that the way that we are teaching the up-and-coming players how to play baseball is wrong. But this is the world we created. We have to make the best of it. I'm interested in seeing how this works out. In high A ball, pitchers are required to step off the rubber completely prior to throwing to any base. If they haven't stepped off the rubber and they throw to a base, it's a balk. See, I'm not crazy about this rule, and I'll combine the next one, which is in low A, that pitchers will be limited to a total of 2 step-offs or pick-offs per plate appearance when there's a runner on base. If you want to do a third one, you can, but if the runner's safe going back, it's a balk. I don't like that because you're eliminating the pickoff. All these rules are really putting the defending team at a huge disadvantage. Andy Pettitte, the greatest pickoff pitcher in baseball history, would have been called for 1 million balks with these rules. You want to have more steals in the game? That's fine. But there's really not much you can do to cause that if you're Rob Manfred or Raul Ibanez, or Michael Hill, or Theo Epstein. These managers have to be willing to chance it. It's just that simple. The analytics say it's not worth it, which I think is complete nonsense, but you have these managers that are so beholden to analytics that they're not going to do what the analytics tell them not to do, even if their gut says do it. There really isn't much in the way of rule changes that's fair to encourage more steals. The larger bases are fine. Anything else, though, I don't think is going to work, but I'm open to trying it. There's going to be a pitch timer in low A. I don't mind that. Let's see how it works. It is frustrating when there are 30 seconds between pitches. No one wants that. It should be faster. There's no question. Let's see how it works. If it's expanded to the majors, it's going to be tough for the older pitchers to adjust, but in the minors, I'm okay with it. I will say, though, that is just in low A West. In low A Southeast, they will have a robo-umpire calling balls and strikes. This is an idea that we've seen proposed for years, for decades even. You have the strike zone on TV. A pitch catches the strike zone, it's a ball. A pitch is outside, high, low, inside, whatever, it's called a strike. We see that all the time. But there is something to be said about the human element. Every sport has a human element in terms of how it's officiated. In hockey, not every penalty is called that should be. And there are some penalties that are called that really aren't penalties. In football, it's the same thing. In basketball, it's the same thing in regards to fouls. Baseball is getting rid of that human element if they go with the robo-umpire. There are some people that will be okay with that. I don't think I'm one of them. I think it's a part of the game. It's been that way for over 100 years. I don't think I can endorse it. I see the argument for it. I don't begrudge the people who like it, but I can't support it. Moving on now to the Pirates, signing Trevor Cahill to a 1-year deal worth $1.5 million. And this is a good move for the Pirates. I like Cahill a lot. Very good pitcher, can come out of the pen, can start, can come in high leverage situations out of the pen if you need him to. I thought about advocating for the Yankees to sign him, but I thought that he'd want to start. And I think he is going to start because the Pirates don't have a full rotation. They have 4 solid guys: Tyler Anderson, Mitch Keller, Chad Kuhl, and Steven Brault. But they don't have a 5th starter. It's probably going to be Cahill. And I don't mind that. You know, I'll say this. If everyone stays healthy for the Pirates in that rotation, I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs or anything, but it wouldn't surprise me if they got like 65, 70 wins. Some people are saying they'll struggle to get even 60. 65, 70, they'd sign up for that in a heartbeat. Alright, now I'll give you some college basketball Valk talk. You know what I'm going to talk about. One of the best times on the calendar is almost upon us. March Madness. There are two things I want to do. Number one is talk about the two ACC teams that had real chances to make March Madness that had their tournament games canceled. Those programs are, of course, Duke and Virginia. I'm not saying Duke was definitely gonna make it. In fact, I didn't think they deserved to make it, but there was a chance that the committee would have put him in. Now they can't. They withdrew from the conference tournament, they withdrew from March Madness because they have a coronavirus outbreak. Same thing with Virginia. And Virginia is tough. They had a real chance to win the ACC tournament and go far in the big dance. Now they have a positive test, which means they can't face Georgia Tech tonight. Georgia Tech is automatically in the ACC title game. They're going to go up against either FSU or UNC, most likely FSU. And FSU will most likely win the conference tournament. The question is, will Virginia be in March Madness? Will the defending champs be knocked out of the big dance because of the coronavirus? I will say, it's still possible that Virginia will be in the big dance. Everyone in that program is going to need to return negative COVID tests for 7 days for their team to be cleared. Let's say those tests start tomorrow. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. The 7th day is the 19th. The first round starts on the 19th. And there will be first round matchups on the 20th. Virginia doesn't need to say, we're going to withdraw. Duke didn't need to say that. They just probably knew that they needed a strong conference tournament showing to get into the big dance. Needless to say, with the positive test, they couldn't have that. So they chose to withdraw from everything rather than be slighted. Virginia's in. Even if they lost their first game in the conference tournament, they're going into the big dance. It's just that simple. But there is a risk that the committee is going to take if they pick Virginia. If a team withdraws from the tournament due to the coronavirus, and that withdrawal happens less than 48 hours from the start of the tournament, March 18th, there won't be a replacement team. So if, hypothetically, Tony Bennett returns a positive coronavirus test on the 17th, Virginia's out. The big dance will commence with 67 teams instead of 68. And that's going to leave a bad taste in everyone's mouths. I don't mind rolling the dice because Virginia does deserve to be in, but it's a big gamble. Duke I think that's God's way of saying, you know what, they didn't deserve to be in anyway. Virginia, it's tough. I think you've got to stick it out. There is another thing that I want to do. As of this very moment, there are 11 teams that won their conference tournament, thus getting an automatic bid. I want to tell you about all 11 teams. And I will start with Appalachian State, which shocked everyone by winning the Sun Belt tournament. It is their first March Madness appearance since 2000. You've got to commend Dustin Kearns for what he's done at App State. Very quickly, he's put in place a very strong defensive system. The Mountaineers are only giving up 64.5 points per game. That's the 40th best mark in the nation. They have 4 guys who are coincidentally their 4 best scorers, averaging over a steal per game. Adrian Delph, Justin Forrest, Michael Almanassi, and Donovan Gregory are all really good two-way players. I don't think they have as bad an offense as the stats say they do. They have talented players. They're just very top-heavy. Outside of those top 4, with Kendall Lewis being out since December, no one else scares me. Those 4 guys are all going to need to show up if the Mountaineers want to pull off the upset. Moving on now to Cleveland State, which won the Horizon Conference tournament. Even though they dominated the Horizon Conference, and Dennis Gates should be commended for the turnaround that the Vikings have had in a very short period of time, this team doesn't scare me. They're not that great offensively. They're not that great defensively. They have some solid players, Torrey Patton, Trey Gomillion, Demoy Hodge, and Craig Bodian. But watching them play, I really wasn't impressed with them. The reality is, they were just the best team in a bad conference. I mean, truthfully, I was rooting for Wright State to win the conference tournament because Wright State has an incredible offense, and they had a good chance of winning a game. If they went up against a bad defensive team, watch out for Wright State, but that's not going to happen. I don't see Cleveland State winning anything in the Big Dance. Moving on now to Drexel, another surprising conference tournament winner. This is their first time in March Madness since 1996, before I was born. And they had to beat Elon to get in. Very surprising that it was Drexel versus Elon. I'll say that. The Dragons are similar to App State. They have a very good defense. They only give up about 67 points per game. That's the 80th best mark in the nation. The thing is, though, they don't have any great defensive players. It's just a really good system that Zach Spiker has the Dragons run. Now, they do have a couple really good players. Cameron Winter and James Butler I like watching. Other than that, TJ Bickerstaff and Zach Walton are solid, but they're nothing special. They're a very top-heavy team. I'd be surprised if Drexel scored an upset. Moving on now to a team that could win the whole thing. They are that good. It is Gonzaga. They had the undefeated season. They finished with the best offense in the nation, over 92 points per game. You watch them play and you just wonder, how on earth can you beat these guys? Corey Kispert, Drew Timme, Jalen Suggs, Joel Ayayi, Andrew Nemhard, Anton Watson, and Aaron Cook. You have 7 really good players. Mark Few is without question one of the best coaches in the nation. Doesn't get the credit that he deserves. Every year, you hear people say, this is the year. This is it. Gonzaga is finally going to break out. They're finally going to win the whole thing. And they never do. They came close. They lost to UNC in 2017. 71-65 in the national title game. But that's been it. I mean, I'd like to say that this is a different team because this is a great Gonzaga team. No Bulldogs team has ever gone undefeated overall. They've gone undefeated in the conference, never overall. Can Gonzaga go on a big run? The answer is yes. Can I pick them confidently in my bracket? It depends on who they're matched up against. I'll say this. I am going to post my bracket on Twitter at RealJacobValk. So we can all laugh at it in about a week or two. Moving on now to Liberty, the first team to clinch a spot in this year's March Madness. And let me tell you, they can score an upset. Out of all the conference winners, outside of Gonzaga, of course, because they're not in the same league as these other guys, I'm most confident in Liberty scoring an upset. I understand that it's the Atlantic Sun. It's hard to read too much into what they did. But Richie McKay has put in place a really good NBA-style system. They have a really good offense. They score 75 points per game, and they give up 59.5 points per game. They're a scary team. They really go like 10 deep. They're a very tough team to prepare for. They ran roughshod over the Atlantic Sun this year. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the Flames scored an upset. Moving on now to Loyola of Chicago. Sister Jean is back. Oh, how I missed her. And you know what? I can make the argument that this team is better than that 17-18 team that went to the Final Four. The Ramblers got to the Final Four in 18 because of their defense. They stifled the U, they stifled the Volunteers, they stifled Nevada, they stifled Kansas State, and they gave Michigan a hard time too. This year, their defense is better. They have the best defense in the nation. 55.5 points against. Porter Moser, once again, has instituted a great system. There's only one guy that you need to key in on, though. That is what makes this team vulnerable. Because in 18, they had several guys that you needed to key in on. Clayton Custer, Marquise Towns, Dante Ingram, Andre Jackson, Cameron Krutwig, and Ben Richardson. None of those guys are there anymore except for Krutwig. A very good scoring center. The Ramblers will only go as far as Krutwig takes them. Can they score an upset? The answer is yes. They have the defense for it. But they're not as deep offensively. Let's put it this way. I don't think Loyola is going to make the Final Four again. Moving on now to Moorhead State. They got in by winning the Ohio Valley Conference. They're another very good defensive team. They really don't have a good offense, but they have a great defensive system. It's anchored by Johnny Broome, one of the most underrated players in the nation. You'll see very quickly how much he can take over a game. They're a very good rebounding team. Devon Cooper and Skylar Potter are very good at snatching up those loose balls. They're not bad scorers either. This just isn't a great Moorhead State team. I commend Preston Spradlin for finally getting the Eagles into the big dance. It's their first March Madness appearance since 2011. But I don't think they're going to make much noise. Moving on now to Mount St. Mary's. They won the Northeast Conference. And this is another very good defensive team. The Mountaineers have only given up 62.3 points per game. That's the 17th best mark in the nation. The thing is, though, their offense is less than useless. Jalen Gibbs was supposed to play a big part of it. He only played in 4 games this year. I give Damian Chong-Key and Nana Opoku credit for trying to step up, but they're not great offensive players. They're limited in how much they can take over a game. This is a very offensively challenged team. Even if they stifle you on defense, they're going to have a tough time scoring. I'd be very surprised if Mount St. Mary's made any noise in this tournament. Moving on now to Oral Roberts. They won the Summit Conference and are in the big dance for the first time since 2008. A lot of these teams have been defensively gifted. The Golden Eagles are offensively gifted. They can shoot the lights out. Max Abmas has averaged 24.5 points per game this year. He's insane. Kevin Obanor is their second leading scorer. He's putting up 18 points a game. There are very few teams in the nation that can score like Oral Roberts. But their defense is really bad. Outside of Abmas and Kareem Thompson, they really don't have any good defensive players. And even then, those guys are just solid defensive players. They're good at getting into the passing lane, but not much else. I'll say this. I'd love to see them matched up against Gonzaga or Iowa, a team like that, because the two teams would probably combine for somewhere close to 200 points. I'm not kidding. But their defense is really going to hold them back. I don't see how they can make a lot of noise. The last team to talk about is Winthrop. They got into the big dance by winning the Big South Conference. Pat Kirksey has been there for a long time, and he always has the Eagles playing well. This is a very well-rounded Eagles team. Chandler Vaudrin, Adonis Arms off the bench, Charles Falden, and DJ Burns are all capable of going off any given night. They also play a very effective defense. They've only given up 66.8 points per game. That's the 78th best mark in the nation. They almost went undefeated. The one loss they had was to UNC Asheville, and they only lost by 2. This is a really good Eagles team. They could take a game or two. That's how well-rounded they are. I like Pat Kirksey a lot. You can make the argument that he's the most underrated coach in the nation. I'm always surprised to not hear his name mentioned when the big schools have coaching vacancies. Because Kirksey has nothing left to prove in Rock Hill, South Carolina. This is an Eagles team that you can't take lightly. Before I let you go, let me give you the schedule for next week and beyond. March 15th, just a Brooklyn Nets show. March 16th, no show. March 17th, first 4 preview. March 18th, my birthday, no show. March 19th, round of 64 preview. March 20th, no show. March 21st, round of 32 preview. March 22nd, no show. March 23rd, big NFL free agency recap. You may be wondering why I'm saving NFL free agency until the 23rd. Instead of recording a show and then scrambling to record something on the latest signing, I'd rather wait until the dust has settled and go team by team. I think that's the best way to do it in terms of this show. And also, it gives me more time to talk about March Madness. March 24th, business as usual. March 25th, NBA trade deadline show. The NFL free agency recap on the 23rd and the NBA trade deadline show on the 25th will constitute the regular episodes of the Jacob Valk show for those days. I'll skip some days now. March 29th, New York Islanders show, to be preceded by a regular episode of the Jacob Valk show. March 31st, New York Yankees season preview, to be preceded by a regular episode of the Jacob Valk show. April 1st, big MLB preview. That will constitute that day's regular episode of the Jacob Valk show. April 5th, Brooklyn Nets show, to be preceded by a regular episode of the Jacob Valk show. April 12th, NHL trade deadline show. After that, New York Islanders trade deadline grade show. I did that last year. It was really fun. April 19th, New York Yankees show, to be preceded by a regular episode of The Jacob Valk Show. And April 29th, in the morning, New York Jets draft preview. If you have any questions, please feel free to tweet at me at RealJacobValk. Until next time, I am Jacob Valk saying that I don't throw hard enough to get a sore arm.